I walked into Peyton's penthouse with my boots still stained from a highway wreck, the scent of burnt rubber clashing with her expensive lilies. Peyton blocked my path immediately, her eyes flaring with disgust as she gestured toward the service elevator. "Riley, you look like you crawled out of a junkyard, and I have high-end developers in the next room," she hissed, checking to see if her guests noticed my grease-stained jacket. I looked past her at the champagne flowing and replied, "I spent 4 hours calculating total losses while you were picking out fonts for fake business cards." "Peyton." She gripped her glass tighter and whispered, "Just stay in the kitchen before you devalue the air in here with your hourly wage aura." Sheila appeared, dripping in gold jewelry I'd bailed out of Hawk last Christmas, and thrust a thick manila envelope into my ribs. "Don't start your dreary insurance talk. Riley, we have actual business to finalize," she snapped, pointing to a mahogany desk in the corner. I scanned the legal jargon for a voluntary waiver of my inheritance rights and felt the cold logic of my profession kick in. "You want me to sign away the family home so Peyton can use it as collateral for another bridge loan?" I asked. Looking at my mother, Sheila crossed her arms and sighed. "Peyton is building an empire while you're just a girl who counts scrap metal. So sign the paper and stop being selfish." I leaned against the desk and gestured toward the window where a new white Cadillac Escalade sat gleaming under the streetlights. "That SUV down there? Peyton, is that part of the empire too?" I asked, tapping the unsigned document with my pen. Peyton smirked and tossed her hair, her voice dripping with triumph. "It's a reward for my first $1 million closing. Something a claims adjuster wouldn't understand." She gloated. I clicked the pen shut and tucked the envelope back into my bag without a signature. "In my business, we call this a red flag for fraud," I said, my voice cutting through the party music. Peyton narrowed her eyes and snarled, "Sign the damn paper." "Riley, you're just the help until the real winners take over." I walked toward the door and replied, "I never sign off on a claim until I've inspected the wreckage myself." I spent the next 48 hours running Peyton's name through every insurance database in Georgia, my eyes burning from the blue light of the screen. I sat in my car outside my father's yard, watching him unload lumber that I knew my $250,000 wire transfer was supposed to cover. I walked up to Arthur as he wiped grease from his forehead and handed him a printout of the Cadillac's registration. "Dad, we need to talk about why the money for your construction materials is currently sitting in Peyton's driveway in the form of a white Escalade," I said, my voice flat. He didn't look at me, instead focusing on his clipboard with a forced intensity that signaled his guilt. "Building a business takes liquid capital, Riley, and a father shouldn't have to explain every board to his daughter," he grumbled. I pointed toward the city skyline and replied, "You told the bank it was a fleet vehicle, but you bought it for her to play pretend while I'm the one working 12-hour shifts." I pulled a tablet from my bag and showed him a digitized loan application bearing a perfect replica of my signature. "You didn't just spend my savings, Dad. You stole my credit identity to back a $320,000 mortgage for Peyton's new office," I said, watching his bravado crumble. He grabbed my arm, his grip desperate and sweaty. "It was just a temporary bridge, Riley. A family favor until her commission checks started rolling in next quarter," he whispered. I pulled away and stared him down. "In my world, this isn't a favor. It's a felony called mortgage fraud," I replied. Arthur's face reddened as he gestured wildly at his struggling yard. "Morgans protect each other from the law. Riley, we don't treat our own flesh and blood like a police report." I checked my watch and stepped back toward my car. "A Morgan would have worked for that money. But you and Peyton just treated me like a high-yield savings account you could raid," I said. I met Sterling at a diner near the courthouse, passing him a thumb drive containing the recorded calls and the forged papers. This is a clean-cut case of identity theft. Riley. But if we pull this trigger, your father goes down with her, Sterling warned. I looked at the spreadsheet on my phone showing $320,000 in fraudulent debt and $250,000 in stolen capital. He made his choice when he put my name on those papers without asking. I replied, my voice echoing in the nearly empty booth. Sterling stirred his coffee and nodded, his expression shifting into professional stone. The bank will trigger a default notice the moment I file the injunction, and that Cadillac will be on a tow truck by noon tomorrow, he explained. I leaned back and watched the rain streak against the diner window. Peyton wanted to play high-stakes games with my life, I said. Now she's going to find out exactly what happens when the house decides to collect. I arrived at Peyton's open house event just as she was guiding a group of high-profile investors through a mansion in Buckhead. She wore a $3,000 suit and held a designer clipboard, her voice dripping with the fake confidence of a woman who thought she'd won. This property is the pinnacle of Atlanta luxury, and my firm holds the exclusive listing, she announced to the nodding crowd. I stepped into the foyer with Sterling and Jordan, my boots echoing sharply on the Italian marble floors. Peyton's face turned a ghostly shade of gray the moment she saw Jordan's uniform and the heavy-duty tow truck idling in the driveway. Riley, I told you to stay away from my professional events with your depressing insurance aura, she hissed, trying to steer her clients toward the terrace. I didn't move, instead pulling a certified court order from my jacket and holding it up for everyone to see. The only thing depressing here is the $320,000 in fraudulent debt you used to stage this entire life. Peyton, I said. Jordan stepped forward and clicked his radio, signaling the recovery team outside to begin. We are here to repossess the white Cadillac Escalade and serve a notice of seizure for all assets tied to the Sterling Morgan Fund, he stated firmly. Peyton let out a high-pitched laugh of desperation as her clients began to whisper and back away toward the exit. This is a misunderstanding. My sister is mentally unstable and jealous of my success. She shrieked at the investors who were already reaching for their phones. I stepped closer until I was inches from her face, the scent of her perfume clashing with the cold reality of the room. In my industry, we call this a total loss, Peyton, because there isn't a single part of your career that isn't built on a lie, I said. Sterling handed her a second set of papers, his expression as cold as a tombstone. You are being served for identity theft and mortgage fraud, and the police are waiting downstairs to discuss your forged signatures, he added. Outside, the sound of the Cadillac's alarm began to blare as the tow truck lifted its wheels off the pavement. Peyton ran to the window, pounding on the glass as she watched her primary status symbol be dragged away like scrap metal. You're destroying this family, Riley. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this public humiliation, she roared, turning on me with her claws out. I didn't flinch, instead adjusting my jacket and looking at the empty room where her investors used to be. The family was destroyed the moment you and Dad decided I was an ATM instead of a sister, I replied. Jordan began placing neon orange seized stickers on her designer furniture and her expensive computer monitors. Everything in this office was bought with my stolen capital, Peyton. And today, the bank is finally closing your account, I said. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her suit wrinkling as she realized her audience had vanished and the law had arrived. I'll kill you for this. I'll make sure you have nothing left, she sobbed, her voice echoing in the hollow mansion. I walked toward the door without looking back and said, I already have nothing left to lose to you, Peyton. And that's why I'm the only one walking out of here with a future. The fallout was instantaneous, a domino effect of bad debt and burnt bridges that I watched from the cold safety of my office. By the following Tuesday, the IRS had flagged Arthur's construction yard for $85,000 in unpaid payroll taxes after Sterling submitted the audited logs. I was sitting at my desk when Sheila burst in, her face blotchy and her designer purse trembling in her hands. "You've turned your father into a criminal." "Riley, the bank is freezing the house and Peyton is facing 5 years for a few signatures," she shrieked, slamming her palms onto my glass desk. I didn't look up from my monitor as I processed a legitimate claim for a stranger. Peyton turned herself into a criminal when she forged my name to fund her delusions. And Arthur helped her do it, I replied. Sheila grabbed a framed photo of us and threw it against the wall, the glass shattering like our family ties. "We did everything for you. We gave you a home. And you repay us by calling the feds on your own blood," she roared. I finally looked her in the eye and said, "You gave me a home that you tried to sell from under me while I was busy paying your utility bills." "Sheila." The phone on my desk rang, and I put it on speaker so my mother could hear Sterling's clinical voice. "Riley, the forensic audit is complete. And we've confirmed $320,000 in mortgage fraud and an additional $250,000 in misappropriated business funds," Sterling announced. Sheila's knees buckled, and she fell into the guest chair, her bravado evaporating into thin air. "Is there no way to settle this?" "Riley, can't you just tell the bank it was a misunderstanding?" she whispered, her voice cracking for the first time. I leaned forward and replied, "In the insurance world, once the claim is filed and the fraud is documented, there is no going back to the way things were," Sterling continued, oblivious to her presence. "The district attorney is moving forward with the indictment, and the foreclosure notice for the family home was posted 20 minutes ago." Sheila let out a guttural sob and reached for my hand, but I pulled it away before she could make contact. "You're a monster. Riley, you're just a cold, heartless machine who cares more about a balance sheet than your mother's roof," she spat. I stood up and opened the door to the hallway, signaling the end of the conversation. "I'm the person who paid for that roof for 3 years while you and Peyton were busy trying to tear it down for parts," I said. 2 days later, Peyton was arrested at a cheap motel, her $3,000 suit replaced by a stained sweatshirt as the police led her away. I stood across the street, watching the scene through my windshield as she screamed my name at the hovering news cameras. Arthur called me from the precinct, his voice sounding old and hollow over the recorded line. "They're taking the yard. Riley, everything I built for 40 years is being auctioned off because you couldn't just keep your mouth shut." He groaned. I looked at the digital copy of the $320,000 loan and replied, "You didn't build it, Dad. You stole it from my future and gambled it on Peyton's vanity." He went silent for a moment before whispering, "I hope those millions were worth losing a father." I hung up the phone and watched the sun set over the Atlanta skyline, feeling the weight of the last 3 years finally vanish into the smog. It wasn't about the money, Dad, I said to the empty car. It was about making sure the wreckage finally stopped at my door. The sentencing hearing took place on a humid Tuesday morning, the air inside the courtroom thick with the smell of old wood and impending finality. Peyton sat at the defense table, her signature blonde hair matted and her designer persona completely stripped away. The judge leaned forward, reviewing the mountain of evidence Sterling and I had submitted. "The court finds a clear pattern of identity theft and financial exploitation totaling $320,000, the judge declared, his voice echoing like a hammer. Peyton turned her head toward me, her lips trembling as she mouthed the word traitor across the aisle. I kept my gaze fixed on the judge and whispered to myself, "In my business, we only look at the evidence." The final judgment was a total liquidation of their pretenses. Peyton received a suspended 3-year sentence with 5 years of strict probation, her real estate license permanently revoked. Arthur was forced into involuntary bankruptcy. The construction yard and the family home auctioned off to satisfy the $250,000 in diverted funds. Sheila stood in the hallway after the adjournment, her eyes hollow and her hands clutching a cheap plastic bag of belongings. "You've won." "Riley, your sister is a felon and your parents are homeless." She spat, her voice a ghost of its former arrogance. I adjusted my coat and looked at her without a shred of guilt. "Nobody won. Sheila, I just stopped the bleeding that you and Peyton started." I replied. Jordan met me at the curb with a final report on the asset liquidation. "The Cadillac was sold at auction, and the proceeds have been credited back to your recovery account," he confirmed, handing me a digital tablet. I signed the final release form and watched the sun set over the Justice Center. "Is it enough to cover the damage?" Jordan asked, glancing at the line of reporters hounding Peyton. I looked at the totals on my screen and realized that for the first time in years, the balance was zero. "The money is back, Jordan. But the interest on the betrayal is something they'll be paying forever," I said. I walked toward my car, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind me in the Georgia heat. The family I knew was gone, replaced by a balance sheet that finally made sense. I moved to New York 3 months later, settling into a quiet apartment in Brooklyn where no one knew the Morgan name or the weight of the $320,000 fraud case. I sat on my balcony watching the ferry cross the East River, the silence of my new life finally drowning out the echoes of Peyton's screams. Sterling called me to confirm that the final restitution check had cleared my account. "You're officially disconnected from their debt, Riley. The court has finalized the restraining orders," he said. I looked at the sunset and replied, "I didn't just lose a family, Sterling. I gained the freedom to never look back." Peyton now works 12-hour shifts at a cleaning service, scrubbing the floors of the luxury condos she once pretended to sell. Sheila and Arthur live in a cramped trailer in rural Georgia, surviving on Social Security and the bitter memory of a daughter they couldn't exploit. My new office at the senior management level is glass and steel, a place where honesty is the only currency I accept. "Is it lonely at the top?" a colleague asked me during my first week. I adjusted my watch and replied, "It's not lonely when you finally stop carrying people who were only trying to pull you down. I am no longer a claims adjuster for other people's accidents. I am the architect of my own peace." Thank you for following Riley Morgan's journey to reclaim her life and her legacy. In a world of fast money and fake status, sometimes the most cinematic revenge is simply living well and holding the line. If you believe that justice should always come before toxic loyalty, please like and subscribe for more stories of resilience. Would you have the courage to cut off your own blood to save your soul? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you in the next story.